You should be grateful I married a wife whose cooking is as bad as yours, huh? Is my cooking really that bad? It's not just bad, it's atrocious. I thought it was dog food. Don't talk like that. I'm Chloe, 35 years old. I've been married to my husband, Jones, for 10 years. Up until a few years ago, we lived in my in-laws' house with my mother-in-law, Eula, and my grandmother-in-law. But since my grandmother-in-law moved into a nursing home, now it's just the three of us. I work at a pharmaceutical company and have busy days, but all the household chores are my responsibility. I wake up early every morning to prepare breakfast and get dinner prepped. Jones doesn't support me in this, and together with Eula, they take advantage of me. Recently, I discovered that Jones has been bad-mouthing my cooking on the internet. Yesterday's post read, "Another day of mediocre food for my wife. I really want a divorce." I checked his past posts, and they were all shockingly cruel. "One who can't even do household chores shouldn't have married me," he wrote. I pride myself on cooking and doing the best I can with household chores. Unable to tolerate his unreasonable complaints, I confronted Jones. "What's the meaning of those posts? Do you really think that way?" Jones looked caught off guard for a moment, but then brazenly replied, "Yes, that's right. You're a failure of a wife, only ever making one soup and one dish." Admittedly, I often make simple meals due to time constraints. I get home from work around 7 p.m. By the time I cook and we eat, it's almost 8 p.m. Eula starts complaining about being hungry if it's late, and Jones grumbles if dinner isn't ready when he gets home. Naturally, the number of dishes I prepare is limited. Neither Jones nor Eula ever help with the chores, yet they complain. There's a reason I can't stand up to them strongly. I've been struggling with unexplained infertility and haven't been able to get pregnant. At first, both Jones and Eula eagerly anticipated a child, but recently they've stopped mentioning it. Instead, Jones often berates me, saying, "I gave up on having children for you, so at least earn money and do the household chores." Eula agrees, adding, "A wife like you who can't do anything right is a disgrace to our family." Initially, I fought back and asked them to stop speaking to me that way, but their constant insults have worn me down, and I've started to accept them. I feel guilty about not being able to have children, and I've been pushing myself to work and do household chores. Then one day, Jones lashed out at me worse than ever before. He came home irritated from work and started complaining. "I'm immediately tired from work, and I come home to this kind of meal again. This isn't a zoo. Stop using only vegetables. I'm not a rabbit. Use meat. Increase the number of dishes." As Jones got more agitated, he finally shouted at me. I was so surprised that I looked at Jones dumbfounded, but he didn't stop complaining. "How can I eat this leftover-like food? The food is terrible. You can't even have children. I don't need a woman like you." When Jones said that, Eula agreed. "Really? Huh? I thought it was dog food." I reached my breaking point with Jones and Eula's abusive words. "If you're going to complain that much, I won't cook anymore. We both work, so you two should help with the chores. And about the leftover-like meals, what do you expect when I only have $50 a month for groceries?" As I fired back, Jones got even angrier. "If you have a problem, you can leave, and if we divorce, it's your fault, so you'll be paying the court fees." Overwhelmed with anger, I thought the divorce court's deposit was irrelevant, so I packed my things and left my in-laws' house. As I left, neither Jones nor Eula tried to stop me, both wearing their sarcastic smiles. Then I went straight to my parents' house. Upon my return home, my parents, though surprised, welcomed me warmly. After a long while, I enjoyed my mom's lavish cooking at home and spent a relaxed time with my family of 3. My parents had sensed something amiss between me and Jones, but they waited until I was ready to speak. 3 days after I returned to my parents' house, feeling emotionally stable, I told them about what Jones and Eula had done to me. Upon hearing my story, my parents were furious and urged me to get a divorce immediately. By then, I had already decided to divorce and was thinking of hiring a lawyer to proceed. However, I couldn't come to terms with ending things without getting back at Jones and Eula. I began to plot how I could make them pay and came up with a plan. As I was preparing, Jones contacted me saying, "Hey, I wrote the divorce papers. Come and get them." Jones had kindly prepared the divorce application. Seeing it as a good opportunity, I headed to my in-laws' house to execute my plan. When I entered the in-laws' house, as expected, it was tidy. Odd for Jones and Eula, who never cleaned or did laundry. But I entered, thinking to myself as I suspected, noting the oddities in the house but not mentioning them. I started talking with Jones and Eula. "Jones, are we really getting divorced?" I asked. "Of course. Why wouldn't we? I need a wife who can't even handle household chores properly," replied Jones. When Jones said that, I asked Grandma, "Did you hear that?" I called her into the living room. It was Jones's grandmother, Eula's stepmother. Eula, surprised, exclaimed, "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" That's exactly what happened. In fact, the plan I had come up with was to call his step-grandmother. Eula was always deferential to this step-grandmother, the reason being this in-law's house originally belonged to her. The father-in-law had passed away due to illness. The step-grandmother, by her own wish, was now living in a nursing home and had promised to leave the house and land to Eula and her family after passing. Given these circumstances, Eula could never stand up to her stepmother. From the beginning of our marriage, I had a good relationship with this step-grandmother and actually visited her frequently at the nursing home. We shared various stories and deepened our bond, but I never mentioned the bullying by Eula and Jones. I thought it would only trouble the step-grandmother to hear such things. However, one day she noticed something was off with me and asked why. Unable to hold back, I cried and confided in her about the bullying by the two. At that time, it ended with just a conversation, but she had told me to speak up immediately if anything happened, promising to help. I didn't want to burden her, but this time I decided to seek her help. Usually gentle, the step-grandmother's face turned angry as she said, "You two? What did you do to Chloe? Bullying your wife? How shameful!" Eula and Jan, scolded by her, couldn't argue back, just looked down silently. But then Jan started making excuses. "Well, Chloe can't have children, and she makes too few dishes in cooking." The step-grandmother sighed and said, "That's because the food budget is only $50. I heard it from Chloe. Because of Jones's debts, there's no money to spend on food." Hearing this, Jan, surprised, exclaimed, "Chloe, you told Grandma? I told you to keep quiet." Actually, Jones has a significant amount of debt. It came to light 2 years ago. Jones got hooked on horse racing, which he started attending with a friend and ended up spending a considerable amount. At that time, we even discussed divorce. But after Jones sincerely apologized and promised never to do it again, we decided not to divorce and repay the debt together. Back then, I was somewhat grateful to Jones for marrying me despite my inability to have children, so I couldn't bring myself to leave him. Fortunately, I was working too, and we figured out that if we saved enough each month, we could repay it all in 3 years. And this year, we were finally going to finish paying off the entire debt. That's why we only had $50 a month to spend on groceries. "Chloe, you should be thanked for paying off the debt, not bullied. It's unacceptable," the step-grandmother scolded. Jones, as I heard a noise outside the living room as I expected, I called out to the person I assumed was hiding. "Why don't you come out? I know you're in there." As I called out, Jones and Eula started to panic. "What are you talking about? That's right, there's no one here." But then someone walked through the living room door. I knew it. I thought someone was here. The person who entered was a young woman I didn't recognize. Jones, Eula, and the young woman all stood there, faces pale. Even my step-grandmother seemed shocked by this turn of events, her face a picture of confusion. I had suspected for some time that Jones was cheating on me. He had always belittled my infertility and complained about my cooking, but it had never been this bad. Over the past year, both Jones and Eula had become increasingly harsh towards me. I began to feel that Jones wanted a divorce. He was probably planning to remarry, having an affair with a younger woman. Eula, hoping for a grandchild, seemed to be conspiring with him to drive me out. This was all happening now because they had finally managed to pay off their debts. They had been relying on my earnings to pay off these debts, but once they were done, I was no longer needed. I had a hunch that after I left the house, they would already be living with this woman in the in-laws' house, and my suspicion was confirmed. The discomfort I felt when I entered the in-laws' house today was a clear sign that Jones's mistress was already living there. During the argument, I deliberately spoke loudly so the woman hiding in the house could hear me talk about the bullying and the debts. I figured she was unaware of these facts, so I decided to reveal their true nature. As expected, the woman, now aware of the truth, I came into the living room with a pale face. Wait a minute. Bullying your wife? Debts? You said you were already divorced, liar. Apparently, Jones had lied about being divorced to date her. He said his ex-wife was coming over to ask for money today, but that was a lie. This isn't about divorce negotiations. It seemed that Jones made up a story about me coming to borrow money from his family. I laughed and said, I'm not struggling for money. I work for a pharmaceutical company and actually earn quite a high salary, to be honest. I earn more than Jones. Hearing this, the woman said, Is that so? But Jones said he was a department head at a pharmaceutical company and that he paid for this house in full. I couldn't stop laughing, knowing Jones had been lying through his teeth. That's a lie. This house belongs to my grandmother, I said. Jones. He was a full-time employee but was fired 2 years ago due to gambling troubles. He's just a contract worker now. Even as I explained, I wondered why I'd stayed married to such a man. Perhaps it was because I felt inferior about not being able to have children, but I regretted not divorcing him sooner. Anyway, it's no longer my concern. I'll be getting a divorce and I'll be suing you both for alimony, I declared. When I said that, the woman exclaimed, Wait a minute. I didn't know this man was married. I was deceived. I looked at the woman's pleading face and felt that she was probably telling the truth. If that's true, why don't you also demand a deposit from Jones? Weren't you two engaged? I noticed a ring on the woman's finger and guessed that they were probably engaged. Yes, he proposed to me last month, she confirmed. As expected, these two were engaged. This meant that Jones had been deceiving this woman, so there was a possibility of a deposit being required, engagement or not. I told her to consult with a lawyer for the rest and let her go home. I believe you're a victim too. Can you discuss this with your lawyer? I'm going to have a talk with Jones and others today, so please go home, I said. Upon hearing this, the woman crying responded, Understood. I'm sorry. Even though I didn't know, I won't see him again. Then Jones and Ula started begging the woman, Wait, you're going to leave? You're abandoning me. What about our grandchild? Weren't you going to support me? The woman, with a look of disgust, said, Don't touch me. I don't want to see your face ever again. I can't deal with people who bully their wives and gamble. I'll contact you through a lawyer later, so be prepared. With that, the woman left the house. Then I signed the divorce papers I had received from Jones. Well, I've signed this, so I'm going to file it now. From now on, you and I are strangers, I declared. As I said this, Jones suddenly changed his attitude and started apologizing to me. I'm sorry, it was just a moment of folly. You're the only one for me. Let's not divorce, he pleaded. Wondering what he was talking about now, I said, It's because she dumped you, right? I'm tired of being used by you. Then Ula, also crying, pleaded, I'm sorry. We were wrong. We don't need a grandchild anymore. We're in trouble without you. I looked at Ula coldly and said, It's about money, right? You're saying this because you'll be in trouble without my salary. Ula, as if I hit the nail on the head, stammered, No, it's not like that. Delivering the final blow, I said, From now on, you'll have to manage with Jones's meager salary. I'm taking the savings I had for the divorce settlement. Saying that, I put the banking card I had kept in the drawer into my bag. Jones grabbed the bag, pleading, Please don't do that. I can't pay off the rest of my debts without that money. It's my salary in here. I was saving it for the debt. It's no longer my concern, I replied firmly. As Jones and I were arguing, my step-grandmother stood up and scolded him. Stop it. You're really pathetic. I'm ashamed that people like you are my family. Leave this house. I'm cutting ties with you. Ula turned pale when my step-grandmother declared she was cutting ties. Charlotte, don't say that. Where will we go if we lose this house? She pleaded helplessly. I don't care. You were only after my house and land. You're not family. Get out, my step-grandmother insisted. Ula and Jones ended up being divorced by me and disowned by my step-grandmother. Left wandering, later my step-grandmother immediately asked a lawyer she knew to start negotiations to evict Ula and Jones from the house. Ula and Jones managed to find an old apartment, and started living there as mother and son. I also immediately filed the divorce papers at the office. Since I brought the banking card as the divorce settlement, I was able to easily sever ties with those two. A month after the divorce, I glanced at Jones's account and saw that posts bad-mouthing me had drawn a lot of criticism for being too harsh. His friends also called it psychological abuse, and he seemed to be isolated as a result. He lost his zest for life and now just goes between work and home. Furthermore, I heard that Ula was a terrible cook, and Jones was forced to eat her awful meals every day, looking haggard. On the other hand, I threw myself more into my work, and I'm about to get a raise. With the stress in my personal life gone, I feel like trying new things and recently started golfing. I hope to meet someone next time who can share a caring relationship.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.